Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Golden Shovel Wrestling Podcast. This week's Saturday Squash is all about the top men in the WWE in 2025. We're breaking down a long list of 10, all the way down to 4 for our final award show at the end of December. Let's get right into it. Roscoe, how we doing?
Yeah, good. I'm good. Looking forward to having a little chat as always.
Yep, you peek behind the curtain, so we're not recording this immediately after the usual Tuesday pod. Ross has tried to darken his room and make it feel like it's the evening, but my blinds are up, making clearly say it's not. But yeah, we've got a list of people here to whittle down. As always, Ross can throw in some extra names if he feels like it, but these are roughly who I think are the top guys in the business this year, and we're going to come with a list of 4 that goes through to that award show right at the end of December. As we've done the last few weeks when we're doing this, Roscoe, I am going to split it up into some rough categories, and category number 1, there's no requirement to take one person from each category, we'll just go for at the end. Category number 1 is the non-world champions, so I've got 3 guys here who have not been world champions this year, but have had unbelievably strong years and deserve to be talked about. The first name is L.A. Knight.
Yeah.
Okay, so no world title win this year, and I feel like we've been waiting for it for a long time, but I think it's important to note that when we started the year, he also took back that US title from Shinsuke Nakamura, re-established it as something important before handing it off to Jacob Fatu. He's still probably the most over quote-unquote non-top guy in the business. The crowd still love him, there's still value there. At the time of recording, I think we're all hoping that he does beat Gunther on Monday night. Because I think he needs that marquee. Even if he doesn't ever ascend to world title status, he needs that marquee victory or statement of his career. And on the flip side, if he doesn't, I think that's a really telling position that he's never going to move above that upper mid-card. The second name I have on this list is Bron Breakker, who I think has had an extremely up and down year. I think he still was the IC champion at the beginning of the year. I'm sure, off the top of my head, I'm sure he was. But at times this year we were worried about his position in the division, that he might not be elevated as much as he should have been. We've talked about the fact that Seth Rollins, when he has a group, doesn't always elevate other people in the way that we would expect. Not blaming him, it just doesn't seem to happen. I think because he is so good on the mic and so good in the ring that these people need to shine even more than otherwise would happen. But arguably Rollins' injury happened at a great time. It pushed him to the forefront. He just looks like the type of person, obviously we know his family, but he looks like the type of person who should hold the World Heavyweight title, a big gold belt. Not the WWE title, the World Heavyweight title. That's what he looks like. He looks like a World Heavyweight champion to me, and obviously we talked about the promo last week and just like, yeah, go for it. Give him a chance to see how it works. So I've got Bron Breakker in this bracket as well. And number 3 is a fan favourite here at the Golden Shovel Wrestling Podcast. That is the greatest luchador in history, Dominik Mysterio. Obviously, he's a 2-time IC champion this year. He's had just won it back last week over John Cena. But he's in such a tough spot because I think he's almost undeniable. I still think there's weaknesses in the ring. I still think he's not perfect. He's still got work to do. But character-wise, in-ring-wise, heat-wise, like he gets a reaction. It's almost perfect. And ultimately, when this Judgment Day collapse eventually happens and the inevitable face turn trigger is pulled, we're about to see an unstoppable freight train that is just going to carry this business for the next decades. Run me through your thoughts. There's 3 names that were not world champions at all, actually never mind this year, but at all, are in the ascendancy in their careers, I guess.
Yeah, all good picks. My gut feeling when you were kind of going through them is that the one who's probably had the weaker of the 3 is probably Bron, I would say. But that then wouldn't say automatically he has had a poor year. He's actually had a decent year. The tricky thing I think we actually have with this is that I think there's a very obvious one of these 3 that stands out. However, if this was done in a few weeks' time, this very specific episode, if LA Knight was to somehow beat Gunther and then go over against John Cena, as unlikely as that might be, then the conversation changes completely and he's got the biggest rub of anyone's ever got. But I think LA Knight, we spoke about earlier on in the year as someone that they look like they had kind of forgotten about. We speak a lot about sometimes they have to like hold people back and figure out where they're going to move people in, squeeze people in. And I think that he's maybe slightly suffered from that, and that he just had this chunk of the year where he just kind of disappeared and fell away completely. I think, though, we are, as we'd said, they're a massive, massive fans of Dom. Anytime that guy goes on the mic, you listen to what he has to say, you want to boo the shit out of him, but kind of like you're really into it. The guy has come on leaps and bounds in multiple different ways in a relatively short space of time. I'd imagine that having a family who are in the business helps. But for me, I feel like Dom is the standout in those three, and he is one that if we're going to be looking ahead as to the guy who's had the best 2025, got to be in the convo, 100%.
I'm just checking there, I think Dom's 26.
Feels about right.
Dom's 28. No, 28. 26, 28. How old do you think Bron Breakker is?
Is he not about this, like, the same sort of age?
He's also 20. Young. He is also 28, which is like, I think the business is in good hands, basically. Ironically, they are both from wrestling families, so there is no doubt that they were born to do this. I think what's really interesting about the two of them is they're extremely different. Dom is a luchador to an extent, and Bron's very much this powerhouse, and yet they both just get it, which is great. We're not seeing, if you're staking the future of the business on two guys, we're not seeing two guys who are going to wrestle the same match every single week for 20 years. We're going to see a little bit of variance, which is great. And obviously LA Knight's one of the guys that we do love watching him. We think he's so underrated. Even still, he's so underrated. It's just obviously he's the wrong side of 40, and if the trigger's not pulled, it's never going to get pulled. But yeah, I think he deserves massive credit because he was a big player in TNA back in the day. Post TNA's peak during the Impact Wrestling days as Eli Drake, and did a good run in NWA at one point as well. But he was brought into NXT and he was moved to main roster, and at one point he was a manager, and there was a risk of him being a jobber, basically a weekly jobber, and he's turned himself in a position where it's like he's such a safe pair of hands. You just need a face to run a program for 6 weeks. Boom, LA Knight, which is not a bad place to be. A guy who was never really meant to be a world champion WWE. If you compare him to something like Sami Zayn, who was always like he will eventually be a champion, LA Knight was never meant to be that, and yet we're all sitting here saying it should happen. It should have happened, and it should still happen. Yeah,
it's mad, isn't it? It's kind of mad that happens sometimes.
This is when we segue into where the episode gets difficult, in my opinion, because I don't think any of the three guys are necessarily going to make the final four. We could maybe put one of them in as a fourth to say that we want to talk about this person at the end of December, or perhaps you're right, LA Knight has the 6 weeks of absolute superstardom and we have to talk about him again. But we start to move into a whole bit of like there's people who may or may not make this list for very different reasons. So this is a list of one here in the middle, and that's what I mentioned, Jey Uso. Again, a guy who I don't think is going to make that top four, but I think if we'd be having this conversation in 2 months' time, it might be a different conversation. I think this heel turn is exactly what he needs, or this storyline and the change in character is due for a refresh. I am annoyed when I see him getting in the middle of a match after saying I'm more than just an entrance, but ultimately he gets a reaction from the crowd. He's over with the fans. He sells merch. He won the world title. His title run was great. See, for a short title run, he did a really good job defending it multiple times and ultimately dropped it back to the guy who is going to come in conversation in a few minutes' time. It wasn't a week for a short run. It was not a week run. And once again, he's established himself as a safe pair of hands for the main roster. So I don't know what your thoughts are on Jey for his overall 2025. Obviously, it's a peak for his career. He won the world title at WrestleMania.
Yeah, massively. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think he's a guy that you actually probably need to put in that shortlist, to be honest, just because I didn't think that, with my knowledge of what wrestling had been like for the few years that I'd sort of stepped away, when I kind of got back interested and got back in the mix and into the swing of things, I didn't think that there's a guy, from my knowledge, that is going to be the face of the company. I just thought he was part of a fun and decent tag team. That was kind of my knowledge of him. But then when you see the tail that he has been on, where, he's maybe not necessarily my cup of tea, but that's okay because he's not necessarily aimed at me. And that's fine. Like, you can see the reactions he gets, and you see that in the ring, he's also had a very strong very strong progress, I think. And all the other bits that we talk about that make a world champ be a world champ, he's kind of got them all, really. So, yeah, as much as he might have been someone when you were outlining that you didn't think might necessarily make that conversation, I think he might actually have to be in it, just purely and simply because he has surpassed the expectations that I have, had for him. And I think he's got to take a heck of a lot of credit for that, as much as, yes, I am one that would just like the eating in the middle of matches. I don't mind it in the entrance, don't mind that, but just, can we stop doing it in matches, please? Especially not in a war game situation where there's all this shit going on and he starts just eating halfway through. It's like, no. Stop doing that. But no, definitely a guy that has had a hell of a year. Of a year.
In this podcast, we always look at the overall aspects, and very much being a top wrestler is more than just what happens between the ropes these days. The presentation matters, the entrance does matter, the merch, not that we're counting merch sales, but we understand that's part of the job of being a main event. These 10 guys will probably be your top 15 merch sellers, I would assume. Maybe not good,
I would think so.
Less of a merch seller, but certainly the rest of them will be. Merch matters, presentation matters, interaction with the fans matters, how you perform matters, what you say in the mic matters, how you say it in the mic matters. The interesting thing is Jey Uso a better wrestler in the ring than he was 10 years ago? Probably not much, but what has changed is the rest of it. And he's done that. He deserves the credit for that. And I always allude to the promo with John Cena and Roman Reigns, where John Cena says to him, "I'm only here because you can't do your job properly." Again, like, is Roman Reigns better between the four corners now than he was then? Probably not, but he got the rest of it fucking nailed on 6 years ago, and he's ridden that to the fucking moon. So there is more than what happens in the ring that makes someone, at least in my view, a great wrestler. There's a reason why people like Daniel Bryan and Kurt Angle are talked about as great technical wrestlers, because obviously they have the other stuff as well, but they're known for what happens
not on the same
in
level.
the ring. Yeah. They're known what happens in the ring. Which gives me a nice segue into another Samoan. I'm going to talk about the Tribal Chief.
Acknowledge him.
I'm acknowledging the Tribal Chief. And I'm going to go ahead right now and say I don't want him in the top 4. And the reason I don't want him in the top 4 is he's been too part-time this year.
How many times has he returned? Is it 4 times? Genuinely?
I seen a stat, he's had like 6 matches this year, and it said 4 returns or 5 returns, whatever it's been. Remember he returned 2 weeks in a row at one point? Obviously he's not won a title this year, and I think we're alluding to the fact that he's going back towards title next year. We did talk about this on Tuesday night for Wednesday's pod, that we do think there is medical reasons for his part-timeness, i.e. I believe there's a study about the fact that leukemia can cause issues with arthritis and pain and joint pain and stuff like that. So we think.
Yeah, I'm sure there was an interview. Did he not say it takes him about an hour to get out of bed or something? Something like that. It's brutal.
But I said this on Tuesday night and the Wednesday, and I will say it again. I think he is the top guy. He is the best in the world. He is the best professional wrestler. The aura. He comes out at War Games, doesn't even stop, raises the ones to the sky, the camera angle, the fireworks, just like, so fucking good. But he doesn't need the world title. He is the world title. That's who he is now.
Yeah, there's something to be said for
basically what
it's valuable to be in a feud with him rather than even have a title. That's a big deal.
As I'm going to say, he's been too part-time to make the top 4. If we were removing that from the list and saying we would put him in there, but we've tried to be somewhat objective and a subjective subject, fair enough. But basically, we're taking a minute or two in the middle of this podcast to acknowledge the Tribal Chief. Is the plan here?
I think that's a very reasonable way to do it. Look, yeah, I agree. He doesn't deserve, when it comes to 2025, to be in that top 4. Now, I'm not going to hold it against him for the reasons that you have outlined, but he is a guy that, he might have only had half a dozen matches and had those returns, but everyone does stop and listen when he appeals. 27 could quite easily be the last year of the Tribal Chief. I don't think any of us would be too shocked if 2026 and 2027 is his swan song, and then he just goes off to sunset and does whatever the hell he wants to do at this point. You know, he'll have made his money. If he wants to go to Hollywood, fine. If he wants to just stay at home and be with the family, that's probably fine too. There's hundreds of them. You know, there's plenty of them to go visit. But no, I think a guy that we can all stop and acknowledge. Perfectly happy to do that.
The next category has been the feud that has dominated Monday Night Raw, and that is Seth Rollins and CM Punk. Now, we debated this at the time, and I think we're all in agreement though that CM Punk's world title reign at SummerSlam for 5 minutes felt cheap, and ultimately his now reign also felt slightly cheap because it did feel like it had to happen because of Seth Rollins' legitimate injury this time, which I understand because it gives you the strongest star power going into WrestleMania season, but we also thought it was a great opportunity to potentially look at an LA Knight or even a Bron Breakker at the time in a lull period where we have War Games and we don't have, and then John Cena's retirement where we don't have the big picture story being told. But understandably, they went a different route. So ultimately, he's a two-time champion this year, which feels a bit wrong to say he was in the main event of WrestleMania Night 1, a great triple threat main event. And you can see he's kind of playing the role of an elder statesman a little bit in the ring now.
Yeah.
It's a slightly different role than we're used to from CM Punk. I think he has lost a step in the ring, which is understandable from a long time out. And then obviously an injury a couple of years ago, which slowed his return. They've got a good balance where he's not a part-timer, but he's not wrestling every single week in singles matches either. I think he's really well presented. And ultimately, as much as I do like This Fire Burns from Killswitch, the music in the presentation is as good as it gets. The static has, an instant reaction from crowds.
Oh, yeah.
And then if we talk about the other half of this double-sided, two-sided coin, I guess, two-sided coin almost, is Seth Rollins, who I peg as one of the best, if not the best, in the last 10 years in terms of how much he's been full-time. And it is a shame to see over the last 2 to 3 years that he's had a couple of injuries, because up until he dropped the title to Drew at WrestleMania, he was always talked about as a guy. Seth Rollins never has time off. He's never had an injury. And I think, sadly, that's now caught up to him. Whereas wrestlers who had injuries have almost had a break. Now it's different. Triple H seems to be giving guys more time off regularly to ensure they're resting and recovering with the lack of or lesser house shows. That also helps him, but I think his body's maybe starting to let him down a little bit. But I think Seth Rollins is phenomenal. Again, you talk about presentation. It doesn't matter whether he's a heel or a face. The crowd are singing his song. Burn It Down just hits. Yes, his outfits are over the top and wacky and whatever else, but it's funny. It works really, really well. And again, we have to acknowledge the fact that post-WrestleMania, we were sitting here saying that we do think he needs that world title again to help the world title. As much as anything, it gives it legitimacy, and that's a hell of a statement to make when you're saying that an individual makes a world title feel legitimate, not the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair comments. I think the pair of these guys have had very, very good years for in different ways. As you say, I'm always going to be a little bit impartial when it comes to CM Punk, because that first run, the whole feuds we've seen was just chef's kiss, just beautiful, an unbelievable set of work. And I do really like the guys. They both bring totally different things, as you say. I was also, like you, gutted that Punk's first of 2 reigns this year was that sub 5-minute run, but I think one of these guys certainly has to go on this list.
Yes,
maybe both. The trouble is, if you told me to pick one, I actually don't know which one, because I think that is it maybe Rollins? Does Rollins maybe edge it out?
I think
slightly.
You're in a situation where you either have to take both or take none, because they're so closely linked, and that's really difficult.
Yeah, that's tricky. And
if we need to go,
do we just save ourselves the headache and just put the both of them on the list? Is that just easier?
I think it could be a 5-man short list at this rate. Do you have any overall thoughts on it? Because obviously Rollins has been injured, but it's happened recently enough that it's not. It's happened recently enough that it's not costing him in this situation.
Yeah, I would think so. Just because the pretty much everything that preceded it was quite good, and obviously the fake injury angle, we all really enjoyed it. As much as we as smarks know that, but
I also know that if you go to TikTok and look at the pinned TikTok, it is me saying that I wasn't enjoying the work of the faction before I had the name division. I was critical of it, and I still am to an extent. I think if Rollins was still there, I don't think we're talking about Bron Breakker and Brunson. Even then, Brunson would sort of faded into obscurity a little bit, because Bron Breakker seems to be the guy right now. So it hasn't all worked. But then it's quite hard to knock him down for that when Punk's been allowed to just be Punk all year, if we're comparing the two of them head to head.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the Punk AJ Lee versus Rollins and Becky thing worked out particularly well either. They were both involved in that. Obviously War Games was ass, so maybe Rollins gets an extra bonus point for not being involved in War Games, but we'll come back to them. And now it's time to flip to the story that dominated SmackDown for the majority of the year, and that is the greatest of all time, John Cena, versus the guy who splits opinion, shall we say, in Cody Rhodes. John Cena is a living legend, and I think he is the greatest wrestler of all time. I do think that ultimately spoiler, want to give this award to him, because if I don't give him one this year, we'll never give him one if he retires. Obviously, on the flip side, it is difficult. He has been somewhat of a part-timer. I think he's been full-time enough that we can let him away with it for the purpose of this, based on that we've not knocked anyone else apart from Roman for being a part-timer who was extremely part-time. The heel turn didn't work out, but the actual moment of the heel turn was a moment of the year type contender.
It was huge.
It was huge. It didn't work out because of the story that should have been told wasn't told, because someone decided not to appear. And ultimately, it did allow for some clunkiness. I think in the summer, it took him a while to get up to speed and get rid of the ring rust. I think the Orton match at Backlash was okay, but not what it could have been. I think the Punk match was slightly better. After that, it picked up. I think John Cena versus Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam will ultimately be a dominant talking point when we do Match of the Year in a few weeks' time, because it is about as close to a perfect wrestling match as, I know recency bias, as I personally remember, in terms of wanting to see nostalgia and wanting to see John Cena.
Yeah.
It was perfect. I loved the AJ Styles match, and I think I responded to Belloc Brido on TikTok this morning, and he was looking for people's moments of the year, and I said, as much as Cody versus Cena was Match of the Year for me, potential Match of the Year for me, I loved the match with AJ because of the callbacks and the nostalgia, and I've said before, I have AJ's like probably my second favourite wrestler of all time. The tribute to Bray Wyatt was like, I did not expect to be sitting there watching a PLE just about crying, but that's what wrestling makes you feel something, and I just think it was perfect. And obviously now, I wasn't totally happy with having the War Games, and we're not totally sure where the end is going to be here, but I couldn't do this without talking about him. And then obviously Cody Rhodes on the other side is really difficult, because I think he probably should end up winning this award in a few weeks' time, but I also know that if Daz was sitting here, he'd be hurling abuse at me right now. And I'm the same. I think he's needing a character change. I think a heel turn's maybe not overdue, but it's getting to that stage where it needs to happen.
Yeah.
He's obviously held the title at the start of the year, held at the end of the year. I do think the thing that's missing from Cody's repertoire is, what does a story with Cody Rhodes look like when he's not chasing the title and not holding the title? Because we've mentioned Roman Reigns. We've mentioned in Seth Rollins the way the title picture, how much title picture misses him. We've mentioned that Reigns is we're now talking Gunther as like a final boss of the WWE. What does Cody Rhodes look like? Because he's been in the title picture pretty much since he won the 2022 Royal Rumble. So that's nearly 4 years or so. What does Cody Rhodes look like? That's not a knock on. That's been hyper picky. But interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll start with John. I think that Cena needs to be in the conversation and needs to be on this list. Purely because, yes, we may have criticised aspects of the heel run, maybe because in effect, maybe some kind of like self-conscious, or not self-conscious, but like a subconscious, we're just so used to this guy being a face that him being a heel's all weird. But that moment was great. Yes, it took a little bit of a while to get going, but once the momentum of him in the ring started, which, if I'm honest, the momentum for that probably started building just before the random turn back to face. It started to start picking up a bit of steam, and he's put on a couple of absolute bangers. He's put people over, might just put people over on the way out, and he is the GOAT, so put him in the list. When it comes to Cody, I'm kind of like on the fence, kind of on him, really. Like, I know that Daz obviously has some very particular thoughts on him, and they're all valid points. They're all valid arguments. But for me, he probably does have to go on the list. I don't know if he wins it. I'll freely admit, I don't know if he does for me. But when you have the reign he's had, when you've been part of the matches that he's put on, when you still get the reaction he does, they're not piping that crowd music in when his music hits. Like, that is still, he is very over, and those crowds in the US do love him. They all sing along to the music. The guy's mobbed people wherever he goes. Like, he's had a very good year. Now, 2026, I would imagine something will change. Either his character, as we're suggesting here, or he might just have to take a step back anyway, just because he's had the Hollywood moments this year. That's going to happen more next year. And if we've got one or two guys that are younger, heels and faces that are kind of buzzing around now, if he's going to start making that transition, maybe not to Roman levels of part-time, but getting to maybe the John Cena level of part-time that we've seen this year, where it's like kind of, as you say, straddling the line. we probably will naturally see less of him, which will probably make it better, I think. But I am in agreement that both of these gentlemen need to go on the list, and I think we're going to need to have a 5-man shot list, because I think that's the only way that we're getting
considering
done here.
Considering the way we're talking, we're actually hitting the odd 6, which is not ideal, which means your Jey Uso pick might need to be... This is why I was saying, like, I don't think I make the list. It's not a knock on Jey Uso, it's a knock on... It's not a short list if you don't shorten it. Now, as we go into the final person on my long list, because we've come up with 9 so far, it is worth mentioning some honourable mentions in this category. It's ridiculous. This is how... I thought this would be a really tough one compared to the women. I think the women have separated themselves in the ring this year from the men a little bit. I think some of their matches have been really, really high points. We were going to get to that obviously over the next few weeks. If you want to go back and listen to the women's long list from last week, please do so. We did put a lot of time and everything, and it went long because how passionate we've been about women's wrestling this year and how good it has been. But it feels really weird to have a list of this and not talk about someone like Kevin Owens, who I know has been out injured since before WrestleMania, but however, had a ridiculous start to the year in that feud with Cody. A guy like Drew McIntyre, who I think is one of the best in the world in terms of the whole package. It's just the booking has let him down this year, I think, at times. We've had Sami Zayn and Ilya Dragunov with these US Open title defences, which have been great matches on Friday nights. And even then, we've actually no space for the sort of breakout type stars like we talked about on the women's side, where we haven't really the opportunity to talk about a Javon Evans or Earl Buffini from NXT, who we're just waiting. Again, it's waiting that trigger being pulled. We're going to have a golden shovel award, a proper golden shovel at the end of the year for the booking decisions that leave us scratching our heads. I know we binned off the weekly thing because it was just taking too long every week, but I'm very much looking at a broad scope of the golden shovel as an ability to pull the trigger. But the last name in the list, and not to tip my cap too much, we have already mentioned him tonight. I think this is a guy who I will probably be pushing for to win this at the end of the year, and that is Gunther. I think when he was out injured, he was missed. And the presentation, we've talked about this a lot about wrestlers, but the change back to that old music is just like, oh my God, it's just so good.
It's good, isn't it?
Two-time world champion. He retired Goldberg. He put on a fucking banger with Pat McAfee. But because they told a story, like, he's not had a bad programme, not had a bad wrestling match, not had a bad story all year, ever since his main roster debut. Yes, I know he got it tight for tapping it to Jey Uso, but again, I would argue that's him showing willingness to do the job to the hot guy at the right time. I'm assuming he was promised the title back. Again, if he didn't have that legitimate injury, does he drop it at SummerSlam, or is he the one that's cashed in on? Because I would have imagined that maybe the cash-in happens during the match if Gunther's not legitimately injured, because you think it was a nose injury he had, so he'd have surgery. So, I mean, we're going to debate this properly in a couple of weeks' time when we record. We're going to do the awards over 2 episodes and do it as a Wednesday, Saturday, to give us a bit of a break over Christmas and pre-record them. But am I being all in too much in one guy, or do you think is Gunther a legitimate claim for... Because, like, here's an example of where we give on this. We've said that we're struggling to separate Punk and Rollins because of how close-knit they were, and we're struggling to separate Cena and Cody because that was the story. Whereas Gunther's just like, I don't give a fuck who you give me every week. I'm just going to be the best, the best in the business on a Monday night.
How long was Gunther out for with the injury? Was it like 4 months?
No, SummerSlam was end of August, and he was back 3 weeks ago. So two and a bit months, 10 weeks shy.
That does make it tricky, man. How are you going to leave people out here? Because he's been a very, very good year. I really, really enjoy watching this stuff. I really, really enjoy seeing him in the ring, the way he cuts a promo. I just like the style, the presentation's excellent. The tweak that they've made since he's came back is phenomenal. How do you have a 9-man shortlist? I'm going to have to start googling that, because there's a lot of people here who have had very, very good years. A lot of them.
If I was proposing a shortlist, I would go Punk, Rollins, Cena, Cody, and Gunther, knowing that when we do record the final awards, Daz will do the job for us on Cody and immediately remove him from the list. And I think, but this is the risk. Like, I think ultimately then we have to. I don't know. It's so difficult. I think that might be the top 5, and I'm the same. I'm frantically looking for other things here. I think Bron Breakker, Dom Mysterio, and LA Knight we automatically exclude just because of the lack of world titles, even though the years they've had. And we've acknowledged that. I think Roman Reigns we exclude because, again, no world title and just 2 part-time probably for this list. However, we're acknowledging the fact that he is the best. Jey Uso, I do feel he should be there, but then I can't. 6 is too many.
Yeah, 6 is just a list at that point, isn't it?
Aye.
I think, yeah, it's one of those ones where apologies to any Jey Uso lovers out there. We do think he's had a good year. We just think he may have had the 6th best year of any of the men in the WWE who is not someone who would class as a rising star. Because, yeah, I know you were right earlier on when you mentioned it. I think that Javon Evans and Obafemi, if things go the way we think, those are going to be people that will be in the 2026 conversation. Maybe we should have actually had rising star ones on their own and we don't feel as bad leaving these guys out because they have a very, very good
So
years.
there is a breakout star award. It's just I'm not doing a long list for it. I'm going to do a top 5 for the actual shortlist awards. The 2 of them are going to be on there. The 2 in the women's division we talked about, and maybe another. We are going to talk about breakout stars.
Then I feel less bad about leaving them out. I feel okay with that.
And that's a testament to the depth of the WWE though. Like, we're calling for these people to appear on the main roster every week, and then you're looking at this list and going, there's at least another 10 names you could add to this list before we even get to them, and that's not a knock on them. That's just Jesus Christ, man. At some point, we're going to need to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. But no, I think that's a good list. I think that's a list that I think I can agree with and I can get behind, and I think we'll have a pretty good debate, the 3 of us, over who takes the crown.
What will be really
the shovel, I suppose.
The shovel, aye. What will be really interesting is obviously Daz. We do these for, again, peek behind the curtain. Maybe we'll do an episode one day where we talk about how we run the podcast, and we'll do it as a video vlog style. Could have been interested if you guys had any knowledge of that, but we've been doing this blind. I build these lists and we do it blind, and we get a blind reaction for the guys just as a trial, and it seems to have worked really, really well this year. But Daz will be like, he'll listen to this, have his thoughts and inputs, and probably have some notes, and then it'll be interesting to see how that varies, because obviously the short lists we will have put more thought into it in terms of this is the argument, but ultimately the short list is different. It's going to be pick one of these, but he'll be able to come back. It'll be interesting to see if he's got different thoughts than us. And it's difficult as well to put recency bias to the side, because also Gunther's had the big return, he's hot right now. Other guys like CM Punk has been there all year, and that's that means you do have some low points and some lulls. I feel like you do have some points when people are like, I can't like Rollins. I couldn't be bothered with Rollins middle of the summer with but ultimately that's unfair on this whole year. So
whereas someone like Roman Reigns can't really have a low point if he's only been 6 times. Can if he's having low points, then he's fucked. Really.
If he's having low points, he's getting bagged. So yeah, I mean, as always, guys, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on our short list and long list. Is there anyone you think we've missed? Is there any case you'd like to make for any of the superstars that we've discussed? Because we will adjust. It's not 6 weeks anymore. There's maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we record the final episodes of the awards season. But at that point, if we think there's enough input for any listeners and viewers, then we will absolutely take that on board, and maybe we just have a Viewer's Choice Award as well, or a Listener's Choice Award. Let us know your thoughts on 2025. Let us know your thoughts on the men. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the follow button wherever you're listening or watching. And as I mentioned in midweek podcast, we do have another channel. We do run some nerd culture type stuff, and the most recent vlog on there is me building a WWE collection of trading cards and retro games. If that's something you're interested in, please let us know, because I can look to do some more of that and cross it over onto these channels. From both of us here and from Daz, who's unfortunately today, take it easy, and we'll see you back here Wednesday for the usual weekly pod.